Welcome to Roots and Resilience. I'm Dr. Tejal.
And I'm Dr. Nehal. We have had some incredible conversations with inspiring individuals that we feel compelled to share with you all.
Listen with an open mind and an open heart. You never know, you might just pick up a pearl that might spark something in you.
Enjoy.
Welcome back for another episode of Roots and Resilience. We are absolutely delighted to have Dr. Shivali Fulchand with us today. She's a medical doctor, but currently working as the editor of the British Medical Journal, also known as the BMJ. She's based in London and has quite a non-traditional path within medicine or beyond medicine, which we are really excited to explore today. So without further ado, welcome to Roots and Resilience, Shivali.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Tejal and Nahal. But I have to say, I'm not the editor. I'm an editor, so slightly less important. But thank
Listen,
you for
right,
that
Shivali,
introduction.
we've promoted you. You are the
Yeah.
editor.
It reminds me at work the other week, one of the editors in chief of one of the other journals, BMJ Medicine, said she was the editor of the BMJ, and then the editor in chief of the BMJ was there, and you're like, I'm so sorry.
Well, thank you for clarifying. Obviously, we like to keep things factually correct, so that's great. Well, start us off in, back in the day, Little Shivali. Tell us about Little Shivali.
Wow, big question for little Shivali. So I don't even know where to start. I grew up in a town called Loughborough. I think people have heard of the place because of the university. But I was born in Birmingham and have quite a big family. My dad's one of 11 children, so obviously a lot of aunts and uncles around. Not just in the UK, but all over the world, but quite a lot of them in the UK. So, I felt like my childhood was spent kind of going between all of these houses, and I mean, I loved it. I feel like as kids, it's quite exciting just to, tag along to what your like older cousins are up to, or I think, I feel like it was a good childhood. And I guess I'm gonna steer this towards like medicine because that's kind of the end goal, with like careers and so on. But I don't know. I just feel from like a young age, I didn't really know like what I was interested in. I just loved being at school, and that's like a really nerdy thing to say, but I just really just enjoyed being at school. I
Nehal
just
was the same. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
oh really?
Shivali,
Okay,
you'll
great.
find out my hobby was revision.
Okay, I'm in good company then. Fantastic. I mean, I think there is something in the kind of culture that sometimes your family sets up is like, studying and so on. But I just genuinely like really enjoyed reading, really enjoyed writing. And that was my favorite subject at school, like English. And that's what I was best at. And I was always like writing stories or like, all this kind of stuff. But then I didn't really know what to do with English as a career. It's not a traditionally Asian path to follow, all those cliches and so on. But I was interested in pursuing something that makes a difference, and naturally, like medicine kind of fits all of those kind of boxes. And I thought I could probably do like writing alongside medicine, that sort of thing. So I don't know. It's kind of steered in the direction. It wasn't kind of a forced decision, but I eventually decided that medicine would be kind of what I wanted to do in the future. And yeah, that's how I kind of ended up in medical school. But before that, I feel like I just loved all sorts of subjects. Really enjoyed art as well. Really enjoyed English. And I was really into sports. If I could have it my way, I'd probably just end up as a professional football player. But anyway, that's for another another lifetime.
And when you went to uni, Shivali, what was your experience in medical school?
Um, so I went to medical school in Wales, and you know, I was just thrilled to get into medical school. So it's like obviously really competitive to get into medical school. So I was so excited to go. But I don't think like at that age when you're 18, 19, you don't really grasp like if it's going to be difficult or not. You're just so excited about the next step that you're just like so excited to get there. And so I think the shock didn't really settle in. I was just there, like surrounded by all these people, and then you kind of, I mean, I didn't realize I was feeling homesick. But that kind of like kicked in later, and I was like, oh, like, I can't just, you know, get my mum's food when I want it, or I can't just like chat to my like sister and stuff. So all of that stuff I did really miss. But at the same time, I feel like being in Wales, it was just quite far away. It's 3.5 hours from home. So it's not like you can just pop back that easily. But at the same time, it means that you kind of start building a new family around you. And being at university for 6 years with, I was living with pretty much the same people the whole time. You really form such close connections and bonds at university that I feel like is very difficult at any other stage of life. And it just, I was thinking about this kind of before coming on today, that we have that, it's the concept of like having friction with things, either with your work or with people. You need to, you wake up in the morning and you don't feel like seeing anyone, but you still have to see those people, means that they see sides of you that, nobody else will. Whereas in our adult lives, like you'll schedule a coffee with someone, so it's kind of you're anticipating that meeting. But at university, there is no escape if you're just surrounded by these people. So you really build these close connections to them. And I think that's one of the biggest things I've valued from my university experience, is that being there for such a long time, and I think this is probably universally true for a lot of medics, dentistry as well, is that this kind of long period of time really helps you to form close connections. And I think that's needed for careers that are so stressful. When I speak to people that have done other degrees, like in finance or law, I feel like they don't develop that same level of connection in some way. And they often say to me that they kind of appreciate the kind of, I guess, the vocational nature of our careers, and how kind of at certain university you have this kind of tutor system, and you really get to know the people around you. They kind of appreciate that collegiality that you have in medicine. It's like wherever you go in the world, you tell someone that you're a doctor or you're a dentist. It's kind of like you have an automatic connection in that respect. So that's a really long-winded way of saying that. That's one of the things I really value about medical school. But the second thing I think is, I think this is unique to I want to see specifically for Wales, is that we got to go on placements all over the country, North Wales, South Wales, like all over. And I was on one placement, and I honestly, it was just the most beautiful place. Like, we put up in a cottage in the middle of North Wales, and yeah, at first it's hard. There's nothing nearby, but you just get so immersed in that place that you end up getting a lot out of it. So I think there's just something there about being out of your comfort zone, I guess. But it ends up being kind of this amazing experience.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Shivali. And I think I can, the bit that you talked about building these really strong bonds and close relationships and friendships with the people around you. You're building a support network, but equally, these are sort of almost lifelong connections that you're forging. And I think it is by virtue of being at the same place at the same time, but also doing something quite stressful together, where it's almost like you've got this unspoken understanding of what what that part of your life involves and entails, and so it kind of, I don't want to call it trauma bonding, but like in a milder way, like it kind of bonds you because you've gone through that turbulent time together.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you know about this broadcaster and medic called Dr. Sarah Jarvis, but I went to one of her, she was speaking at an event I was at, and she said she was she's a GP by medical, but she has lots of other different interests, and she does a lot of TV work and broadcasting work, and she was Oxbridge graduate, but she to this day has maybe I think weekly or monthly video calls with like her uni buddies.
Wow.
And they touch base, and they're all probably off doing different things and different, all sorts of different things. But she must be, I don't know, well into her career, probably on the latter part of her career. Maybe in her 50s, I'm not sure, but she's an awesome lady, firstly. But yeah, she mentioned that she still is in touch with her uni friends and they have this regular conversation, and I thought that was actually really nice because these are people that actually know you. They know you almost inside out, in the sense that like you shared, they've been really they've seen you at your best and necessarily not your best, and
Yeah,
they
no, it's
and you can trust them, I guess. So
hmm hmm
yeah.
I've heard that. I mean, I've friends that have gone to Oxbridge. I think there's something about obviously that system that they have as well, if like they're living in the same colleges and you're in the same vicinity. And I'm like, maybe someone's thought this through that actually this is such a great way of really bonding with the people around you. And I've seen that like various stages of my career, even after I graduated and was in medicine. When you're around those people a lot, you have no choice but to like get to know them, get close to them. And we talk a lot nowadays about, well, in medicine anyway, this like kind of loss of the firm within like a ward structure. Like people don't really live near the hospitals anymore. But you sometimes I do feel maybe we've lost some of that from it, and that's why we're having some of the kind of workplace culture issues that we are seeing. Um, because I've also seen from working in other places that, working those long hours, you just naturally humans just want to find a way of connecting, and hard experiences somehow do that really well. Maybe we
I
need more
love
hard
that. I love it.
experiences.
I think it's so true. Humans always want to find a way of connecting. It is our true nature to connect, to help, to be kind. And I think that's really, really beautiful. So it sounds like you had a really fun time in Wales, which is great. And I think Tej and I can definitely resonate to a lot of what you said there. So once you finished medical school, did you enjoy clinical medicine, or were you still dreaming of English and the arts and playing football?
Um, yeah, probably all of those things still. Um, well, it's interesting. So at medical school, I already was kind of like dipping my toe into kind of writing. I feel like when I went on placements, and some people seem to kind of know like what organ they were interested in. Like some people like, yeah, I want to be a cardiologist. I love hearts, or like, oh, like love endocrine. I mean, like, I was like, what? I didn't get it. People just had their things. But I think I was quite curious about like when I went on a ward, I think I'd start thinking about, oh, why is it that this like patient's so like unhappy with their care, or like how could we do things better? Or at the same time, like there was the doctor strikes that started around 2016. So I started thinking around that. I was like, what is this going to look like for the future of medicine? So I was starting to have all of these kind of maybe existential questions, or kind of, more system level questions. Um, so I actually very serendipitously came across an essay competition. And the question was, if I remember correctly now, what can we do to prepare like medical students to lead the NHS? And I was like, wow, this is such a big question, but I love these big questions, and I'm sure I could write something because I'm always thinking about like random like stuff like this. Um, and we were out on placement in West Wales, and there was literally nothing to do there apart from go to placement. And so one evening, after like we'd all kind of gone to our rooms, I just couldn't sleep, and I was up at like 2 a.m. and I was like, oh, like, and all of a sudden I was like, I've got great ideas to write this essay. I'm just gonna write this essay right now. Got up, like wrote this a first draft. It wasn't like the final thing, but then like went to bed, and then like next day I just submitted it, and ended up like getting shortlisted for this competition. And yeah, anyway, like great experience. It was with the organization called Faculty of Medical Leadership and Management. But ended up being like such a good thing to do, because through that I then like made various connections, which I guess I'll talk about. But that was kind of like, yeah, an example of like just getting involved in writing through in a different way. And then the second thing is that one of my good friends at medical school came to me with an idea one day. He was like, Shivali, we should start a journal, a medical journal, for students, because like there's not many opportunities for students to get involved with learning about medical publishing. And like naturally, I was like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Like maybe we'll do it for like a couple of nights, and then like I just like going with the flow with like cool ideas. But then all of a sudden, it turned into like a thing. Like 3 months later, there was actually a journal. There was actually support to do this thing, and it's actually still running today. It's like 10 years on. It's called the British Student Doctor Journal. And the whole idea was that we give medical students training in kind of medical publishing and so on. So I'm not as involved anymore, but just kind of as a trustee. But and it's run. We try to keep it like close to medical students and junior doctors. So that was another way. So I feel like things that you do have that you're interested in, they do manifest in other ways. And I just um, I guess I kept that connection. But coming back to your question about clinical medicine, so I mean, I did enjoy clinical medicine, but I also had all these other interests, which was like hard. Like I really wanted to do all these other things as well as being a clinician, and that was the hard part. So once I got to like my foundation training years, they call it something different now, but those first 2 years after you graduate, I think I was really missing that whilst I was working as a doctor, and so I was always looking for ways of like inserting it into my day, but it becomes harder and harder because like you're so tired from the kind of mental drain and the physical drain, everything drain of being a doctor, that you just don't have as much time. And then I ended up getting a fellowship through that organization, the Faculty of Medical Leadership. And basically that gives you a year of just getting to learn and understand about how national health organizations work. And you're placed with an organization, and the organization I was placed with was the British Medical Journal. And I never thought I'd get that as I ranked as my first choice. Didn't think I'd get it, but I got it. So in 2019, I went for a year. I was placed with the MJ, also learning about health organizations, and it was just like the most transformative year. Because like I feel like everything changed after that point in terms of what I was doing in my career. So that's what happened. And then after that, I didn't practice clinical medicine again. Not because it was intentional. I didn't want to lose that kind of side of my career, but other things just happened.
So at this point, now you find yourself in kind of uncharted territory. Like you probably don't have anyone who's gone down your path to even pick up the phone and speak to, I suppose, because perhaps it's sort of it's unconventional.
Yeah.
So did you ever be like, were you ever thinking like, where am I going to go from here? Or was it just, I'm going to do the next thing and then see where it goes, and then I'll think about the next thing after? Like, what was your thought process at the time when you were sort of leaving a very traditional path?
Yeah, I think I mean, I did feel like when I was on the ward talking to other medics that I just felt like I was so interested in the other things. I just needed to talk, I need other people to talk about these things with. And then once I got outside of medicine, I was at the BMJ. I was talking to the people that were talking in the same way or feeling or think, you know what I mean? Like you just find your people. So it did kind of feel a bit like a coming home when I had that role. And it was like just really exciting that you just think like, oh, I want to be around this kind of environment a bit more. But I actually, I didn't actually stay at the BMJ after that year. I got an opportunity to move to America after that, and do a postdoctoral fellowship. So in America, basically, if you have a medical degree, you can do a postdoctoral fellowship, which is not as easy to do in the UK. You have to have like a PhD, but it's like anyway. Long story short, I think my mindset was that I just really wanted to learn as much as I could about like the various sides of healthcare. I thought that would make me the best doctor possible. Um, Clinical work is like one part of it, but I thought, if I want to be an academic clinician, I want to know about publishing. I want to know about clinical trials. Public health is like again something I was really interested in. So I mean the opportunity was to work in clinical trials and also in America, and I thought, well, what better place, because they're running the most number of clinical trials anywhere in the world. So I ended up moving to California. And who wouldn't want to move to California is like so I was like, okay, I've got to do this. So I moved, and I was out there for just over 2 years. And yeah, so again, like very different experience. I continued freelancing for the BMJ, continued kind of doing kind of trustee work for the British Student Doctor Journal. Um, so, those pieces were still there, but kind of in a different way. And I think for me, it was always like, okay, what am I learning out of this? Like, how is it gonna help? And I don't regret that kind of thinking. It was very kind of I didn't know where it was going. Like, I didn't know if I was going to end up settling in the US, but I was like, I've just got to do this thing. I don't know what's going to happen 5 years from now, but this is such a cool opportunity that I just have to take it. Um, so
Wow. And did
yeah.
you have any fear? Like, were you ever scared? Like, I'm going to move to the US. I don't know what's going to happen.
Um,
And how were your
I was
family with all of it?
yeah, two good questions. Okay, so I wasn't scared. This was something I just knew I wanted to do. Like, I just wanted to move abroad. I wanted to have the experience of like being away. I mean, I lived away in Cardiff, but it just felt like living in a different country just felt like a challenge in itself that I felt like I had to do because, for and I think this is true for all most Asian like parents. Like, they're very, you feel there's a lot of love in the family. They want to do a lot of things for you. And, for me, when I was at medical school, my mum would send me away with like a whole like freezer bag full of food. So she's like, in case you can't cook one night, what are you gonna do? That sort of like, and then in my fifth year, I had to say to her, I was like, Mum, like, please don't send me any food. I'm gonna do it myself. So there was just this thing in me that I was like, I just want to look after myself. I just want to kind of do things, and there was that like very like a small side, but it was something in my head. And also, I in my family, like my mum, for example, she left like her where she lived as a child, moved to another country, and then I just started again effectively. And I was like, it takes so much strength to be able to do something like that. So anyway, all of that just felt I was like, I need to challenge myself to do this thing. But also the second part of it was just felt very exciting to move to the US. I mean, this is pre all the stuff that's going on right now. So it felt exciting at the time that, I want to see how like the best of medicine is practiced. And I felt like the most innovative things were happening in America. So I should go and see what that's all about. And if that's better than the UK, what is it that we could learn? And I think that kind of just wanting to know more is what kind of drove me there. So I wasn't scared, but my family were. So my headphone just fell out. My family was supportive actually. My dad was the more kind of hesitant one than my mom. My mom, I think, because of my mom's experience, she was like, "Yeah, go, like it's all good." And a lot of people were saying to her, like, she's never gonna come back. Like, it's California, like the weather is amazing, and all this stuff. So that must be quite scary as a parent that your child is like potentially moving to the other side of the world, never coming back. But like, she never once was like, "You shouldn't go." My dad was a bit like, "Oh, are you sure?" Like, but overall, like supportive. So, can't ask for more than that.
Amazing. And just rolling back to before when you were like, when you set up the student journal, which is phenomenal. And it's a
Mm.
testament to your commitment and the idea that it's still running today, 10 years on. You should be really proud of that, by the way.
Thank
When
More
you.
than
you
10 years,
said,
right?
It's actually I had a meeting last week. It's like at the 10-year anniversary this year. So yeah,
ah,
yeah,
Oh, wow.
so when you said you wanted to give people an idea of what medical publishing was about, tell us and
yeah.
our listeners, what is medical publishing?
Okay. So medical publishing is a huge industry, but it consists of various things. So um, whenever you like want to get published in a journal, there is a whole process that goes on behind that. Like, we know about, peer review. But after peer review, there's editors that deal with your kind of manuscript. So that's scientific publishing, and that is a whole industry in itself, and it's a huge industry actually. And there's some very big players in that medical publishing industry, like you must have heard of like Wiley, Elsevier, and so on. These are publishers that have contracts with university libraries, and they're the ones that make, if you're going to do a research paper, for example, and you want to find something, you go behind the paywall, you will go to these publishers. There are some very established journals that have, since the kind of beginning of that industry have been around. So the big names are the British Medical Journal, the Lancet Journal, JAMA, so that's in America, New England Journal of Medicine. These are kind of very old journals that have been there from the beginning. And so that's kind of one side of the medical publishing industry, which is kind of where it all started from. But now it's obviously evolving into all sorts of things. You've got like AI coming up, you've got medical writing, you've got ghost writers, like there's a whole other side. But specifically for medical students, it was particularly important at the time because if you're applying for academic training programs, you need to have like a certain number of publications. And as a medical student, it's very hard to kind of get publications and like do that kind of research. Like you either have to kind of know someone that's going to like support you to do it, and so it was all quite opaque. It's not something you had teaching on at medical school of like how is it that you can get involved in research and get it published. So that's kind of the gap that the medical student journal that we started was filling, is that it gives you that training platform to learn how to do all of these things so you feel confident to approach these kind of big journals, which like it seems kind of out of reach almost. I think that hopefully that answers your
No,
question.
that does. That's amazing. Yeah, that's really cool.
Are you ever afraid that AI might take your job?
Like my current job?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually a big question that we are having actually, and I actually don't feel scared at the moment. Maybe I'll change my mind in a couple of years if it's like all evolving very fast. Yeah, I think people think like the job of an editor is just kind of your sentence is missing a letter or something. I don't know. But the job of an editor is, and the reason I find it so interesting, it's all about what does this like mean in the context of everything that's happening in the world right now. That's kind of the lens I see things through. Is like, for example, today I was reviewing an article about the kind of state of palliative care in the UK, and so I'm reading this article, and the person who's writing it is a specialist in palliative care. Like they're so good at what they're doing, but what I bring to the table is that I have the context of like, okay, I've seen all of these other articles that we published in the BMJ, and I've also seen kind of what's going on. I keep a tab of like what's going on in the world. And in the context of all of that, what does this mean for my readership? And so, yes, there is a world where maybe an AI could take that role completely. And but as things stand, we use AI a lot at work, and we've been doing a lot of work on how it's going to help editors. But it's good as a tool in the sense of like if you know what you want out of it, it will give you a very good answer. Like if I'll, for example, if I want to search for like a suitable author to write on a topic, I'll put in a prompt and it might give me a list of like 10 potential authors. And they might be good, they might be fake authors as well. So I do still need to do the double checking. So there is still a human element to that role. But if I put the whole article in and just say, hey, can you make this a BMJ editorial? It doesn't do that job as well as, but I mean, there is a world where it could change, but I haven't, I'm not someone that's opposed to AI. I think there are people that are very like, oh, I hate AI and all of this stuff, but I can genuinely see how this could be helpful. But at the moment, it just feels like it creates more work than less, unless you really know what you want from the tools.
I think that's fair, actually. I have heard that you have to ask very specific questions, and also depends what obviously AI like system you're using, which engine you're using. So that's really interesting because obviously I was very naive, and as an editor, I thought, yeah, it is like, proofreading and checking, but you've very beautifully summarized that actually you are looking at the bigger picture. And I love the word readership. Like it's like rhymes with leadership. It's really exciting.
That's like our favorite word, readership.
Readership,
let's grow our readership.
Yeah. What the readership wants, and it's true, and I didn't think of it like that, so thank you, that's very useful.
Hey, are you enjoying this episode? If you are, you might love our monthly newsletter. It's where Nehal and I share podcast updates, community news, upcoming events, reflections, ideas, and some fun extras. You can sign up at the link in the show notes now. back to the conversation.
So, actually, let's break it down and backtrack a little bit. Like, what does a typical
Yeah.
day look like for you,
Oh,
if there is
so
one?
gonna start with, you know, that phrase people say to make the job sound more interesting. Like, there's no, it's like one day that's the same. But it's true, like, well, there is no one day that's the same in being an editor. That's why it's so great. Um, okay, I mean, okay, if there was a typical day, so my job, there's lots of different types of editors as well. I think editor is a very confusing term. Like at BMJ, everyone's an editor, but you could be doing completely different jobs. Like you could either be like running social media and video, or you could be like literally reading dozens of research articles every day. So I work on editorials and education content at the BMJ. My editorials content is within the scholarly comment, which sounds very scholarly and important. Anyway, it's like the more kind of academic side of the journal, but it's about the commentary and like talking around kind of big issues that are happening in the world. And we find expert authors to give commentary on certain topics. Like I gave the example of palliative care. Another one I read today was on prisoner mental health. Other big topics are the women's health strategy, which has come out as of yesterday. So you know, I would, for example, I would look for suitable authors to write on it. But then I would think, but the thing is, it's not just about asking an author. It's like, okay, why this author? What have they published on before? What are their conflicts of interest? And this is another like really, I find this topic really interesting, but like conflicts of interest and financial conflicts of interest and how that impacts what you're actually going to say and write. And at the BMJ, and I, you know, I'm gonna, you know, for the BMJ, like trumpeting them in particular, I think compared to other journals, we do such a rigorous job at this that we want our content to be free of bias. So it's a big part of the editor's job, kind of looking at that. So I might spend some time like looking at their conflicts of interest, seeing if they're going to be suitable to write. Then I might spend some time looking at the articles that have come in. I will do that process that I mentioned, kind of like how does this fit with the style of the journal? How does it fit with the context of what's going on in the world today? And then they will spend some time in meetings, like all office jobs. So we'll have one of my favorite meetings actually, that we don't, I wish we had every week, but we don't, is we will do some brainstorming of ideas. Like we'll talk about like what's going on in the world and like what we need to cover more of within the journal. We have weekly meetings with the editor-in-chief talking about commissioning ideas, what we've got in the pipeline. We have a planning meeting of what's coming up in the next issue. It's kind of, you know, Devil's Web Prada, that kind of, you know, trying to make this sound sexier
I
now.
was literally thinking that.
Yeah, that kind of thing, but not as, yeah, you know. Yeah, so that's kind of like a typical day. That's what we do. But you know, there are other things like we'll go along to, for example, press releases, or we'll go to conferences. I might end up doing a podcast. So I've done a few podcasts. You might end up doing some writing for the journal. So really, it just depends what's going on week by week. Honestly, like I've every week is different in some way. You know, like I mentioned, I'm going, or before we started talking, I'm going to this like event on Monday. So it's great in that respect, you know, that you really get to engage with the hot topics of what's going on now.
And
And
how
yeah.
have that's so interesting. How have you found the hot topics have changed like over the years, through the years? Have you seen different things? Have you seen
Yeah,
the same things keep coming up again, or have you felt like the world of medicine has completely shifted the focus and lens?
I think I mean, I think it's dramatically changed, and I think it's always going to, because, you know, the world is changing so quickly as well. So when I was there in 2019, that kind of 6 months before COVID started, the then editor in chief's focus was climate change, and so I focused a lot on content around climate change. I wrote a feature on doctors who are protesting for Extinction Rebellion, and I did like opinion pieces, kind of focusing on that. So that was like a huge thing at the time. But then once COVID came, the focus completely shifted at the journal, and the second 6 months, like pretty much all we did was focus on COVID, because everyone was looking to the BMJ for like, what is the British Medical Journal saying about COVID? It was like everyone was working really hard on content for that. And then once I left, and then in that period, I was kind of freelancing, so I wasn't as closely involved. But now that I've come back, the shift is now changed again. Like nobody really wants to talk about COVID anymore. I think everyone's too traumatized from what happened, but it's still really important. But we will still talk about it. But now the focus is on like what's happening with AI, Palantir, NHS. There are themes that obviously will obviously always cover the NHS, but it's like what's the developments of the NHS are going to change. So it's always going to be changing and evolving.
Fantastic. And what are there any projects that you're currently working on right now, alongside what you're doing?
Um, yeah, multiple things. So, I mean, starting with the AI project is something as I said, I'm like really interested in, and just how journals are managing AI. No one's got a handle of how we're going to use these technologies. People are using in such divergent ways. So we had an example for, when authors use AI, what do we do about it? So we have a statement that people can, declare about their use, but people are using it to various degrees. Like some people will use it to write their entirety of their article, and it's like that is not okay. But is it okay for like someone whose first language isn't English? So kind of questions around that and use of AI. So we're part of this AI team essentially that is thinking around like what prompts are the most suitable, what tools are the most suitable. So that's kind of one project that's been like particularly interesting. The kind of main thread of my work is thinking around editorials and like content for the year, and going along to like relevant conferences. So that's kind of another project that I'm working on at the moment. And I haven't mentioned this at all, but education content at the BMJ is some of our best read work, and this is more around kind of the clinical content, advising clinicians and so on. But again, that takes a lot of thinking around, okay, what is kind of covered in the journal at the moment? What do we need to cover? So that's like another thread as well of my work. Yeah, I
I'm
think
going to
that's
jump in there again and
yeah.
ask, so what transferable skills did you have as a
Mm.
medical clinical doctor that you took forward into, say, the kind of work you're doing now, and what new skills did you have to develop to be able to excel at what you're doing?
Mm. Yeah, that's a great question. Wondering if you need any skills to be an editor.
I'm
So
sure you do.
yeah, I think so the skill set of being an editor is obviously very different to being a clinician. And so when I try to describe this to clinicians, they're like, oh, like what competencies do you need signed off and what like I was like,
What
no.
work-based
Like,
assessments have you done?
well, yeah, exactly. Like, no, I haven't done a cannula or anything like that. It's very different. So I think because I feel like if you're doing something since you are at university, it's training in itself. So I feel like I have been training in this from very early on in my career. But I would say like the skills are that you just need to have an interest in. I think the biggest thing is having an interest. Like as I said to you, I was always interested in these kind of big questions. I was reading about them in my spare time. I would write about it in my spare time, even if I wouldn't post it anywhere. Like I have a folder now of all the stuff that I wrote that nobody's seen, but that's fine because like 2% might get published somewhere. So it was just having that kind of passion and interest, and I think that goes with most things. Like you can only fake it for so long. Like you need to have a genuine interest in what you're doing. So I think that's the first prerequisite. The second is that I think you probably do need some sort of reasonable level of language skills. I don't know if it might change with AI, you probably won't. But I think that's probably helpful for the role. Third is probably attention to detail. You see people are making like claims and references and so on. There's been like a few times where I've been like, hey, I read this somewhere else, or this reference is like not the right, that kind of thing. So there are transferable skills. Like you need attention to detail in clinical practice as well. But it's just in a kind of a different way. Yeah, I think that's answered your question. But I would say though that there's a couple of things I haven't also mentioned. But after working in clinical medicine, working in clinical trials, and then I actually worked in a corporate job for a couple of years. I worked in life sciences consulting as well. The reason I did that is I wanted to learn more about business and healthcare, which is a whole like huge kind of area. But I would say like coming back to the BMJ full time after gaining all of those experiences, that kind of, when I got the job, they said that you bringing so much other experience to the role, which is important for an editor. So I would, yeah, I think that's also, you know, that's kind of why I've ended up where I am today, because of doing all those different things.
So tell us about the time where you were working in the consultancy role.
Yeah.
How did you fall into that, and how was that?
So when I was doing my fellowship, the clinical trials fellowship, I was thinking around what I wanted to do after that. I was thinking about, do I want to settle in the US and do kind of medical training there? And I started like revising for the exams, but something just wasn't sitting right with me. I was like, I'm just not sure this is where I want to like live for the rest of my life. This is not where I want to do my training. Like there was just something that I just didn't, was feeling off. And then I was going to like I was, the Stanford Business School is like really famous. And so I went along to some of their talks. So I was just interested. We were working with a lot of pharmaceutical companies at the time. They were sponsoring our clinical trials. And I was just quite interested in, how does this industry work? So I went along to some of the talks at the business school, and some of them were by consultancy firms, and they would talk about the kind of projects that they're working on. And the way consulting firms work is you have like, a small team, almost like a firm that you would have like on a ward. That's how they described it to us. But you would be working on projects that last anywhere between like 2 weeks to like 16 weeks, and you'd work on a specific problem. So, for example, like a pharmaceutical company is trying to decide whether to pursue X drug over Y drug. Like, what should they do? And it was again like this calling to me of like, oh, it's a big question. Like, I'm interested in that. Like, what would I do? I don't know. Like, how would I think around that problem? And I think what really got me interested in consulting is that the whole focus was on how you think through a problem. It's how you structure a problem. How do you kind of get to the answer in a way that is defensible, which I found really interesting. The same way in medicine, like how do you think through how to get to that diagnosis? But this was in a much more kind of systems way. And because I was just interested in health systems, I thought this is a great way of learning that skill. So anyway, I was like, you know what, there's no harm in like doing this. Let me try this out. And also they had an office in London, and I wanted to move back to the UK. So it was kind of like a win-win. But again, it was this decision actually I was more scared about, because I was like, this feels like I'm really making a change away from medicine. Like everything up to that point I felt like was some like very kind of directly related to patient care, whereas this was very much in a corporate setting. And I was like, I'm not sure if where I'm going to go after this. But I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do it anyway. And I did. But I stayed there for 2 years. I decided that that wasn't for me forever. But I was glad to have the experience.
Okay, so Shivali, so far we know you like big questions. It also seems like you're very kind of an intuitive person. You know when something sits right, feels right, and when maybe something feels
Do it
off.
too much, yeah.
Curious.
Yeah.
You're a curious kitten. You like thinking about things, reflecting and writing. So what were the two biggest things that you took away from your corporate experience?
Mm. Um, Two biggest things I took away is that um, I really loved that they gave me a £25 voucher for my dinner every night. That I missed that. No, I'm joking. Things I took away. Hmm. So I think similar to medicine, I think I do really enjoy kind of intense working environments. That's like another maybe toxic side of me. Is that so I found a lot of satisfaction from working so intensely on a problem, and it was hard, but at the end of it, it was you learned so much through that process, and it was like short bursts of really hard work, but you got something out of it. So what I kind of learned from that is that it's important to kind of, if there's something that you want to achieve, it's important to kind of just focus. Like in that job, we had like one project at a time, and we just gave all of our attention to that project. There was no other there was no time for anything else. I was working on it like 16 hours a day. So like you learn a lot very quickly about that thing. I don't do that anymore, by the way. But like it's that kind of principle that you kind of really focus in on a particular thing that you want to work on, you'll get the result more quickly. So that's kind of like a bigger level like takeaway. But the second thing is the more I guess just learning about the industry of healthcare, and healthcare as an industry is like a huge thing that's evolved so much over the last 25 years that I feel like a lot of us don't have that insight into what a pharmaceutical company does or what a health tech company does. Like, how do they run? How do they interact with doctors? All of those kinds of things. I don't think I mean, I didn't fully appreciate till I was working in that role and I was working directly with them. So just that kind of understanding is, I find like really invaluable now as well. Now that I'm reading like a lot of stuff or like reports and so on, like it just kind of makes a bit more sense when you've kind of been working in it.
Do you find there's a lot of burnout within the corporate
Oh,
world?
100%. It's terrible. Like you don't want, I mean, what they said about people, everyone that came in is that, either you kind of be there for 2 years or you'd be there for like forever. I was in the 2 year bucket. As I said, like the hours are really long. It was really hard. I wasn't sleeping some nights till like 2, 3 a.m. Like you're expected back in by like 8, 9 a.m. So that kind of working environment, you do obviously get burnt out very quickly, unless you don't need sleep. But like there were people there that genuinely didn't really sleep. It was quite scary. So I don't think that was great, but there was an acknowledgement within the firm that it wasn't great. They made everything else so sweet that, that they, you would overlook your sleep for that. So there was that element. I think the second part of it is that, corporate culture is interesting. They talk about the concept of golden handcuffs. Like they give you so many like perks that you just can't leave. And I had come into consulting kind of a bit more mid-career, but there was people that have come in at 21 on these crazy salaries for a 21-year-old. I don't think a 21-year-old should ever be on like corporate salaries. I just don't think it's healthy. But I just think it's crazy that you get so locked into that culture that you don't think that there's anything else out there. And I think that is not healthy. I overall, I think you need, and I had a chat about this to a couple of the partners that were working there, and they knew that come from a medical background, and they could see that I wasn't so sucked in as everyone else. And I think they were like, yeah, it's because you come from this different background, and it's good for you that you don't feel as like strongly about the stuff that happened in the office. Like, for example, people get really upset about like a PowerPoint presentation that like one, I don't know, like an arrow's missing or something. Like that sort of thing is like, it's not, no one's dead. Like it's fine. Like don't worry about it. But I think that's one of the challenges with corporate culture. I think people get so worried about things that are so inconsequential. But I on the flip side of that, it's amazing to have that attention to detail as well to your work. And when we're doing things that, for example, now in this job, like I do feel like it is more consequential. Like we do want to focus on the important stuff. Like it's important to have that level of attention to detail and things that matter. And sometimes it's good to train in somewhere that maybe it doesn't matter as much. You know what I mean? Like, so
It must have been really interesting. Sorry,
yeah.
it must have been really interesting to like actually coming from a medical background to be working alongside non-medics, because I remember at university there was such a unity amongst, it was like medics and everyone else,
Yeah.
and also just the way medics relate to each other and so forth. So when you're working in a high pressured environment, very very different. Did that play a part other than in the way that you already explained?
I think I was also always someone that didn't, I wasn't of the mindset that I just wanted to be around medics all the time. I think there was definitely people like that at university that they just like thrived of like being around medics, talk about medicine all the time. I didn't find that enjoyable. I was really interested in like lots of different things. And so I think I thrived in being able to just like talk to people from different backgrounds and like learn from them. And you just learn different ways of thinking or like how to kind of approach problems or how to tackle a spreadsheet. I mean, all sorts of things. I mean, just, yeah, but I don't know. I think I really enjoyed it. And it's something that I still enjoy. Like in my job now, I still meet people from non-medical backgrounds. And I think, you know, I think medicine is probably one of the few professions where you're just surrounded by medics all the time. I think it's a bit unusual. So probably important for a medic to go and like find some other friends.
No, I think, do you know, but dentists are the same. I feel like we attract
Really,
dentists because
yeah.
naturally that's what who you come
Yeah.
across,
No, I
right? Like
know.
a lot of our
Yeah.
network is healthcare professionals. But I remember one person gave us some advice, and this person was like, hang out with non-dentists as well. And actually,
Mm.
it's
Yeah.
so important because you learn different things, you broaden your perspective, your horizons, and
Yeah.
you actually see what else is out there. So kudos for you for really diving in there and seeing what else is out there and going into a corporate world. That's really cool. So, Shivali, tell us about your textbook,
Yeah. So,
if you're allowed.
yeah, no, it's published, it's out, so I'm definitely allowed. So that's really exciting. It's again, it's not just my textbook. I'm not the editor. I am just
Teja and
one
I
author.
have no concept of any other editors. The only editor in the world is Shivali.
Wow, yeah, you guys, yeah, anyway. Um, I'm an author of a couple of chapters in the textbook that has multiple authors, and I was just felt really lucky to be approached to be kind of asked to write these couple of chapters. And that was about 3 years ago now. This took a long time in the making. Um, the textbook is on anti-racist medicine. And the two lead editors, one is a professor of ethics at Oxford University, and the other is a pediatrician by background, but is doing his PhD in race and medicine at Cambridge. And so they recognize that there is a gap in our medical training in race and medicine. And I mean, when I say race and medicine, it just sounds like there's so many things you could talk about that it's kind of unclear what I'm referring to. And I think that for that purpose, there needed to be a textbook that brings it all together in one place. So that was great for them to have that vision. And I was approached to write the chapters on clinical trials and science policy, related as I'd obviously worked in clinical trials and was working kind of more directly with pharmaceutical companies. So yeah, that's out. And then on Monday we've got the launch for that at the House of Lords, which is really exciting. And what I'm told is that this textbook is going to be distributed to every medical school in the UK, and after this launch. So the hope is that in some way it will be in the curriculum of every medical school, which is, yeah, super exciting.
That's an incredible achievement. So congratulations,
Thank you.
firstly.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm just thinking about if I was a doctor or a dentist, or frankly speaking, anyone who has an interest in writing, but their main job or their vocational profession isn't really that, but they have an interest in it.
Hmm.
What would your advice be to these people in terms of nurturing that interest?
Sorry, nurturing like an interest in writing
In
or like
writing, yeah, like in
mm,
writing, and that you spoke about so early on, and you really enjoyed writing stories and things like that, and then
yeah.
you've managed to carry that forward in so many different ways, and I think that's brilliant. Like you author like BMJ and all this other stuff that
Mm,
you spoke about, but yeah,
yeah, no, it is. I think about this because I do get people approaching me now and then, and it's hard because I feel like in medicine, dentistry, and careers like that, you have such a treadmill. Like you just know kind of what's coming next. If there's something you want to do, like there's a very kind of clear path to getting there. Whereas for these kind of professions, there isn't, and I think that is a challenge to the profession. So, for example, at the BMJ, we only have kind of two roles per year. One is for like someone that's in qualified, and one that's a medical student. And then we have like these smaller roles, like 3-4 week apprenticeships that medical students can do. So there are kind of limited roles, which is one of the reasons we started the journal in the first place, is to open up those opportunities. So I guess the first thing I'd say, if you've got an interest in writing or anything like that, is that you I mean, just start like searching out there what is out there. I feel like, for example, this essay competition I found, I don't even remember how I found it. I would think I was just Googling, it came up somewhere. Maybe it was on Facebook, the early days of like algorithms, like finding, I don't know what it was. So, I think there is that element of just kind of just keeping your eye out for things. I think the second thing, which I found really helpful, so for example, when I was applying to consulting, completely different industry, like I didn't know anyone, didn't know anything. I just spoke to a lot of people, and that's kind of scary, just like kind of reaching out to people and saying, hey, like, do you have half an hour to chat with me? But people are actually mostly quite willing to speak to you, even if they seem like they're, really high up and, they don't have time. So obviously, some people will respond to you, but, on LinkedIn, I've messaged so many people just saying, like, I'd love to have a chat with you, or, and that's worked really well for me. So if there's someone that you're like, I would love to learn from this person, like, just reach out to them. Like, the worst that's going to happen is they'll say no. So that's my second piece of advice. My third piece of advice is just don't be afraid when opportunities come up. You're going to get more no's than yeses. There's so many things I haven't talked about where I just haven't got those things, but it's fine. I'm still here. I'm still doing like my thing. So just to like apply for those things. Like for example, the essay competition at medical school, like I was like, there's just no way. Like I have no experience in this, but like let me just go for it anyway. So just like trying stuff out, and some things will land, some things won't.
Nice.
Love that. Love it.
And I think we were chatting earlier and you mentioned something about the writer of color
Oh yeah.
project. Would you like to elaborate?
Yes, I think there's a theme in this conversation where it sounds like I've done everything, but I've done nothing. So I was actually referring to a book that I've been reading called Writers of Color, and it's a really great book because it compiles like essays from lots of different writers, and talking about their experiences in it could be a variety of ways, but. It's been helpful for me because so I'm doing more writing now. Kind of working on another project at the moment on a popular kind of medical book, not a textbook, but more of a general read for the public. And one of the things I found, I've been on this training program as well, is that it's publishing and writing is just another area where there is not as much representation, like it's increasing, but it's just, I feel like in medicine dentistry, we have pretty good representation nowadays, which is great. But in other industries, and particularly in publishing, like we do see like a lack of representation. So this book's been really interesting, kind of talking through people's experiences. And stories are like one way we can kind of see ourselves and like how we're feeling. And I find that the really great part about reading is that, just that ability to kind of reflect back on what other people are going through and how it kind of articulates what you're feeling. Like for example, one writer in his essay was talking about how he was, just trying to write a fiction book, so obviously quite different to what I'm writing, but trying to write a fiction book, and he felt like all of the publishers just wanted him to write kind of about his experience of being an immigrant and that kind of minority story, but he wanted it to be a bit more about like other things and trying to stretch himself to like in some way that you don't have to just write about your experience to be a writer. You can write about like, I don't know, living in like Hong Kong, even if you haven't maybe like, so anyway, that sort of thing. But what he was saying is that he wasn't ready to write about those things. Like you need to have gone through the complexity in your own life to be able to like appreciate the complexity in other people's lives. And I found that like a really interesting quote, because I felt like, even in my writing, I've observed when I've gone through difficult things, I've gone through complexities and challenges, it actually improved my writing. And that comes back to something I said earlier about like the friction that you experience in your life. Those are the moments where you get like real breakthroughs, whether it's like in your career, in your relationships, like and it's the same thing with writing. So anyway, this book I'm just finding really interesting, just to kind of help support that journey that I have like as a writer as well.
Amazing. Shivali, it's been so insightful, interesting, to take a deep dive into your world, and to just, yeah, share your journey with us. So thanks for that. And as we come to a close, our sort of closing tradition is to ask our guests if they could leave our listeners with one message that they feel really passionate about? And I think you shared several, but is there any particular one that you would love to help conclude this conversation with?
Um, I am going to conclude with something I was alluding to earlier. It's just I think when good opportunities arise, it's okay to step away from the path and find your own way, because I think that's how the most interesting lives are lived. So
Love it.
I'll leave it there. Yeah.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. And that's it, right? It's living a life that's true to you and that's special to
Absolutely.
you in its own way. So thank you for coming. It's been
Thank you
great.
both. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's been so much fun.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoy this episode, don't forget to hit follow on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and to hit subscribe on YouTube so that you never miss a new one. It really helps if you rate and review the show, and if you found this episode valuable, share it with a friend, family member, or colleague. We appreciate your support, and we'll catch you next time. Bye bye.